Hello Year 6 and welcome to your first virtual English lesson. Before we get started, you are going to need to make sure that you have some paper and a pen. You might also need a ruler and a pencil. And you also need to know where some different resources on the webpage are. So there is a planning sheet for the newspaper that you are going to write today. If you would like to use it, you might want to go in, you might want to print it off if you've got that, or you might want to get it up on your computer if you want to make some notes. Equally, you can make some notes on a piece of paper beside you. So that's up to you. There is also another flip chart in this section on the webpage, which tells you all about the Bristol bus boycott. So it is the lesson that we went through in history, which will give you more information about what you're going to write for your newspaper report if you need it later. So you might just want to check that you know where those things are, and you need to check that you've got something to write with and some paper before we begin. So if you need to pause me and get yourself ready, then do that and start me back up. Okay, we're going to start the lesson by thinking back to last week when we looked at an example newspaper report. If you remember, we read about the start of World War II and we unpicked that example and decided on the different things, the different sections that would be needed in a newspaper report. We came up with some different shapes or symbols to show that and make a bit of a plan. If you remember, we did it on the board in the classroom. So I want you to think back now, what can you remember? So pause the lesson, note down the different shapes that you can remember, see if you can remember them all, and then play me again to check if you remembered correctly. Okay, let's have a look at the shapes that we came up with. So we're going to start with a headline, but after that we need the date. Then we need a hook, okay? A summary paragraph to start off with that hooks our reader in, that gives them a quick summary of everything that's happened so we can draw them in so they'll know what we're going to be talking about. And we'll need to include the 5 W's in that, okay? The what has happened, the who, the where, the when, and the why. Our next symbol is the timeline, which indicates that when we're going to go back and retell the events from the start, we're going to tell them in time order, in chronological order. We can then have a couple of quotes from key people, so what they might say about the events. And then our final section is this crystal ball here, the future section. What might happen next as a result of these events? So the newspaper article that I want you to start today, and we're going to write this over 2 lessons, is about the Bristol bus boycott, which we learned about last week in history. So have a little think to yourself. Can you remember the dates of the boycott? Can you remember the people that were involved? And can you remember the key events of what happened? Pause this video, make some notes. You can either use your planning sheet if you've got that ready, or just jot down some notes on a piece of paper beside you. And then when you're ready, start up the video again and I will give a recap. Okay. So, the Bristol bus boycott took place in 1963. It began in the spring, with Guy Bailey being refused a job as a bus conductor at the Bristol Omnibus Company. Now, if you remember, Guy Bailey came over to Britain from Jamaica in 1961, and he was promised that there would be jobs here. It was the motherland, and they were coming to be able to get jobs and new opportunities. However, as he went to his interview to be a bus conductor, he was immediately refused the job based only on the colour of his skin. This then led to a boycott being organised. Remember, a boycott means stopping using something. So boycotting the bus service meant stopping using the buses. And this was for a few months. So it began on the 29th of April, 1963, and then that went on through the summer and ended in August. And then finally, the 28th of August, 1963, the colour bar, so the fact that they were discriminating against colour, was lifted. So that discrimination was ended at that company. It was banned to refuse someone a job based only on the colour of their skin. So the key people that you need to know about: Guy Bailey, we've just talked about. Roy Hackett led up this group of people along with these other men, the WIDC, the West Indian Development Council, and it was a group that wanted to challenge racial discrimination in Bristol. Then Paul Stevenson, if you remember, in 1962, he joined the WIDC. He knew Guy Bailey, he taught him at night school, and he'd heard about what had happened, him being refused the job. And so he organised and led the Bristol bus boycott. He had been inspired by Rosa Parks in America and the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955, which we learnt about in history last week. So you might want to mention that as the inspiration behind the Bristol bus boycott. Now, remember, if you have forgotten any more details or you want further details, open up that other flip chart from history that's saved on the webpage. You can pause this lesson here. You can familiarise yourself with the facts if you need to, and then start up again. Okay, so we are going to write from the time that the colour bar was lifted. So from the time that the boycott had been successful and that discrimination wasn't allowed to happen anymore within that company, okay? So we are imagining it's the 28th of August, 1963. We are going to have to include a chronology of events, so the story in time order of all the events that led up to this moment. So giving a bit of background and then explaining the details of the boycott. We're going to end with saying what it might mean for the future. Now, obviously, we're going to imagine that we're in August 1963 and we don't know what's going to happen, but actually, our history knowledge tells us that 2 years later, 1965, under Harold Wilson as Prime Minister, the Race Relations Act was introduced, which stopped some of the discrimination in different areas based on people's skin colour, and that was a direct result of this boycott. So, make sure that you have your piece of paper where you're going to write your newspaper ready. If you have chosen to use the planning sheet, you might want to have that out first so that you can jot ideas before you write your newspaper up in neat. You don't have to do that, that is your choice. The first thing that you need to do is come up with a headline for your article. So your headline needs to be eye-catching, you might want to use some alliteration, and don't have anything which is too long. So have a think about what you might want to use. For example, we could have Bristol bus boycott success. Okay, we could have boycott lifts ban. Anything that is short and snappy and is going to give an idea of what we're talking about and draw our reader in. Once you've decided on what your headline is going to be, you need to write that nice and large at the top of your page. Then you need to organise your page into columns. So if you've got a ruler at home, that would be really helpful to split your page into a couple of columns so that your writing will look like a real newspaper article. Now we are going to use the shapes to write each section. So underneath your headline, you're going to need the date. Now remember, we are writing from the 28th of August 1963. So pop that in. For shapes 2 and 3, which are the ones we're going to focus on today, I am going to give you an example sentence to get you started. Now, just like when we do this in class, you can borrow my sentence to start your paragraph and then fill it in with your ideas, or you can write a similar one of your own, okay? It's there to give you an idea. We are going to write these first 2 parts today, and then tomorrow we will add to it with the rest of the newspaper report, okay? So take your time. Okay, the first section then, the hook, the 5 W's. You need to decide the who, the what, the where, the why, and the when. And you need to work out how you can get all of those into a small paragraph. This is my example sentence. This morning, as a direct result of the recent protests, the colour bar relating to employment on the Bristol buses has been lifted. Okay, so in my sentence already, I've got a when, and I've got a what and a why. Okay, I've got the ban being lifted because of the protests. Okay, so I might, and I've also got a where because I've got Bristol. So what I might want to include in my next sentence is a bit about who. Okay, so I'm only going to use 1 or 2 sentences to start this off. This is my summary. So I'm giving a short summary of what's happened, giving those details just to draw my reader in. Then in my next section, I am going to give detail. You should stop the video now and do your hook section. So 1, 2 sentences that are going to give your 5 W's and are going to get your newspaper report started. You might want to use the planner and write out your 5 W's before you put that into a sentence, or you can write directly onto your newspaper report. It is up to you. But pause the video, take as much time as you need to write your short summary paragraph, and then come back to me. Okay, so now your summary is done. We are at the second shape. This is the last piece that we are going to do today, and it is the biggest part of your newspaper report. So remember, it is a timeline because we need to go back to the beginning and then retell the story. Now remember, you are reporting on events, so you don't want it to be really descriptive and lots of lovely description and imagery like you would in a story. You are reporting events. So just like before, I have got an example sentence. You can borrow this to get you started, or it can just give you an idea of how it might begin. So this is my example. Tensions between the black and minority ethnic community and Bristol buses have been at an all-time high recently, becoming heightened in April this year. So that would be my opening sentence, and then that would lead me into explaining the events from April. Now, you need to pause the video so that you can write this section of your news report. I would recommend using your planning sheet or jotting down the events before you start writing your paragraph. You need to start at the very beginning, which is Guy Bailey being refused the job. And then you need to explain the other things that happened after that leading up to August, which is when we are writing from now. This section should probably be a couple of short paragraphs long. So continue writing down in your columns after your summary. You might in your column want to leave some space for a picture because as we learnt last week, newspapers often have a picture with a caption. You might want to choose where your picture is going to go, in which column. You might want to leave a little space for that, and we can do that at the end. So have as much time as you need to write your events. Now remember, you're not moving on. So you're not doing your quotes and you're not doing your future paragraph. You are just doing your timeline of events, okay? Your couple of paragraphs detailing now what has actually happened between April and August of 1963. Come back to the video once you have done that. Okay, well done. You have successfully finished lesson number 1. Keep your newspaper article safe because we are going to come back to it to do the rest of the shapes tomorrow. Well done, Year 6. I'll see you in the next lesson.